Hello there. Welcome to Blitz Transmissions. I'm Tommy, and this is going to be the first of a series of interviews that I do here on the channel. Today, we are interviewing the one and only Derryl DePriest. Derryl, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Tommy. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again as well. Before we get into the interview, real quick, I just want to plug everything. Make sure to check out everything in the description, that being links to Discord, Instagram, X, all my social media is linked down below. And also make sure to subscribe if you're not yet subscribed to Blitz Transmissions. I've got awesome Star Wars content coming out all the time. So with all the housekeeping aside, all 2 seconds of it, that is. Derryl, we met at a convention called ICCCon earlier in October of this year. So real quick, I just want to, in case anyone doesn't know who Derryl is, I'm giving Derryl the chance to introduce himself. So Derryl, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I had the privilege of working for Hasbro for 18 years, and it was basically my dream job. So I had kind of maneuvered my career to one day work for them, and I was lucky to get the job. And I managed both G.I. Joe. I came into Hasbro in 2001 as director of marketing for G.I. Joe, and a few years later, I moved to the Star Wars team and headed up Star Wars product management, and then the entirety of Star Wars for the better part of 10 years. So in my time there, I released a lot of toy lines. We launched Indiana Jones against the Crystal Skull movie. A whole bunch of things that I love were the highlights of my career. Beyblade Generation 2 was under my watch. A lot of great stuff. So great memories.
Oh yeah, you're saying all these names, and I'm like, I had that, and I had that. So was it always Star Wars for you ultimately, or was it just kind of everything?
Well, when I first started out, so in my early 20s is when I became reacquainted with G.I. Joe. So my childhood was kind of bracketed by the 12-inch G.I. Joe, the very tall G.I. Joes from the 1960s and the 1970s. So I was born in 65. Under the Christmas tree in the early 70s, I was getting 12-inch G.I. Joe. And then my childhood kind of ended, I would say, when I was entering high school. That's when I kind of realized I was maybe a little bit too old to play with toys, and the last toys I was getting were the 3 3/4 Star Wars toys from Kenner. So my childhood was solidly in like the late 70s, pretty much. And then but I was always very good with my toys. I always acted like a collector when I was a kid. And a few years ago, I found an old box of photographs that I had taken when I was a kid. And it's not like typical, pictures of like kids might have with their toys. Mine were all about, laying out the similar types of things and taking photos, almost like somebody in a museum that was curating their collection. I was categorizing things and collecting them. But so I always took great care of my toys, put them away, because I knew one day, I had a sense, I didn't know what it was, that one day I would be, reacquainted with them and really glad that I kept them in great shape. And it wasn't just until a few years after that I was on my way to go to grad school in Rochester, New York. I grew up in San Diego, so I was taking a cross-country trip to go to school. Went into an antique store and kind of got reacquainted instantly with with my childhood toys. Bought a G.I. Joe, and then the rest of the trip across the country, I was just stopping in places and buying toys. And so that kind of rekindled my love for toys. And I have been a collector ever since my early 20s, pretty much. And so that's kind of the story about when I started back up collecting. And ever since then, I've been full on a collector, and then was able to kind of maneuver that into the dream of working for Hasbro.
That's super cool. It's kind of funny when you're talking about it, I kind of was hearing my own life experience so far with that, because when I was a kid, I remember vividly, I would organize, like I had to make sure that the specific accessories that came with the figure never left that figure. Like everything had to stay together. Even when I was like a toddler, my parents told me that when I would play with dinosaurs, I would always separate the dinosaurs based on like what sets they came with. And they weren't allowed to they were allowed to intermingle when I was playing, but after I was done, they weren't allowed to be mixed together anymore. And then obviously, again, like you said, you get into high school and for me, I was too cool for that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I kind of like dabbled in, Legos and things like that a little bit in high school, but it wasn't until I actually went to college that I actually got into Funko Pops first with Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
And then I remembered that action figures are way cooler than bobbleheads. So I started to get into the Black Series line, which you can see behind me here. And that honestly is what kind of kicked off my adult collecting to the scale that it's at now was the Black Series line.
Awesome.
So as far as Hasbro goes, that you said that was always your dream to end up there. So how did that work out for you? You said you went to grad school in New York.
Yeah, so I went to grad school at the University of Rochester, and I originally thought I would be a research scientist. So I was working on a PhD in neuroscience.
Wow.
And I was there for 5 years. I didn't finish my PhD, but I got my master's.
Okay.
And I thought I would have a research lab at a university sometime, solving complex problems with, I was interested in sensation, how the brain processes visual signals and color and depth and, all those things. Very, very cool puzzle. But I kind of realized along the way that I'm not smart enough to figure out how my own brain works. So I was going to be frustrated in that. But at the same time, I was actively buying toys, putting ads in the paper to buy just old toys. And I was buying G.I. Joe, both 12-inch, 3 3/4 at the time. This was the late 80s, and people were starting to sell their 3 3/4 collections for money because they were going into high school and they needed money or whatever, So they would out to the garage sale, they would go. I would buy all those. I got hooked on G.I. Joe 3 3/4, and I was buying Star Wars 3 3/4. So it was a great time to start buying what was, what everybody had and was kind of coming onto the market. But while I was in grad school, I started to go to the very first G.I. Joe conventions, which were held, the big G.I. Joe conventions, which were held in Los Angeles. So I'd go back there on a couple of those trips, and I would make like little diorama displays. I remember I had a bunch of G.I. Joe Green Berets, the 12-inch Green Berets, and I would like cut bamboo and make jungles and stuff for them and really take pictures of them. And I thought, wow, I'm pretty good at this, like making things look real and stuff like that. I'm like, I bet, I wonder if Hasbro could use me somehow. I knew I'd like to work for Hasbro because as I was walking down the toy aisles, I thought this looks really fun, and intuitively, I had a good sense for what makes toys fun and what makes them cool and how to design lines, make things collectible for the collectors of the day, things like that. And I just contacted Hasbro, and I had met them at those early G.I. Joe conventions. And I basically said, I would, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing. I would like to work for you guys someday. How do I do that? And so I sent a letter, and I got a call back from the vice president of marketing, a guy named Vinny DeLiva at Hasbro. Wow. This would have been around 1991. And he spent a half an hour with me on the phone. And he didn't know me very well, but he, gave me his time. And he basically said, we did a long discussion. He said, look, it sounds like you would really be a good fit in marketing, or marketing is what you could do. He says, my recommendation is just go get a marketing job. If that's what you want to do, go get a marketing job. It doesn't matter what you market, telephones or, groceries, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I can't hire you because you have no experience. But if you're serious about it, that's what you want to do. Go get some experience, and then who knows where that'll lead you. And that's what I did. I took that to heart, and I left grad school, got a first marketing job. I did some marketing research, but kind of stumbled into, luckily, a great first marketing job. I moved out to California, and someone at Atari Games named Mary Fujihara hired me to do marketing for the arcade game division of Atari. So that was
Cool.
a dream come true. First of all, I love video games too, and got hired into that. And then 8 years later, kind of maneuvered my way over to Hasbro. So very lucky, but I got kind of life-changing advice from the Vinny at Hasbro, and I'll always treasure that. I took it to heart, did what he said, and I always try to pay that forward. With anybody who asks for advice, is like, go, if you're serious about it. Here are the things you can consider, and do. So that's how I got there. Is total course direction in kind of life, based on someone willing to take their time to give me good advice.
That's seriously cool, man. I love hearing stories like that, because it's something that I've found in my life to be tried and true. Is if you want something, do the work and go get it. I think that your story right there is a perfect example of that kind of life lesson. If you really are serious about something, put in the time, put in the work, and you will eventually get there. And that's super cool. As far as video games go, are you still, like, you play video games now, or?
No, I don't. No. My kids do. I don't.
Okay. Good enough,
I pretty much I liked the simpler generation of video games. So I grew up kind of playing games in the arcade. First time I had keys in my hand, I remember going to the arcade, dropping quarters in machines, and loved playing a whole host of games then. Those are the kind of things that Atari was doing, which is, kind of short form video games designed to entertain for 15 minutes or half an hour, or, things like that. And I did play, I had a SNES and a Genesis when they first came out, and I dabbled in that. That was around contemporary with my time at Atari. But after that, I haven't owned a system that's too complex, too involved, and I kind of like the solo adventures rather than multiplayer online games.
Yeah, there's some cool ones out now, like Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor for Star Wars. Those are really fun. I know I haven't played Survivor yet, which shame on me, but I know a lot of my friends have played both those games, and they say they're a lot of fun single player.
Nice.
So as far as the Star Wars action figures, at ICC-Con, you had a vendor booth, and I picked up a couple things from you. So I picked up, these were sets that I had as a kid in this packaging, sets that I owned. My dad and I would spend hours and hours and hours. And actually, you met my dad at ICC-Con too. I know he talked your ear off for way too long.
That was fun meeting you guys. Yep.
So I did get this pack, and then I got another one that came with a different Republic gunship, this one here. So what was the battle packs were some of my favorite things, and a lot of friends my age that grew up with Star Wars toys, battle packs were some of the best things that you could buy. So I know that you said you had some involvement with the battle packs. So kind of tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So my time on the Star Wars brand started in, if I recall, October of 2004, which is right before we launched the Revenge of the Sith line. So Revenge of the Sith came out in May 2005. I came in, it was right in the thick of things. The team had already developed the movie line, but my job was kind of what's called landing the plane, which is helping figure out, the numbers for everything that we were going to bring in, and also start to develop the line that was going to follow up the Revenge of the Sith line. And so it was right in the middle of it. The key thing, I'll break this into two parts. One of the key things with Star Wars up until that point had always been that it had been a boom or bust brand, which meant that there was a movie, the movie came in, Star Wars shot up to the top, based on all the product that retailers wanted, that Hasbro was willing to make. It was kind of a, put your finger in the air. How big is Star Wars going to be? Let's kind of make it to that. And in some cases, Hasbro's like, we're going to ride it to a great year of sales. But after that, Star Wars will be dead. Crash back down. No one's going to want Star Wars, and it's just going to sit at shelves until the next movie. And we're just not going to have much of a future in Star Wars, and we'll plan for the next movie. There was always things in between, but they weren't big lines. They weren't kind of aggressive lines. They were just nice and polite little lines, and fans weren't really getting a lot of stuff. So, and when episode 1 came out, Phantom Menace, retailers wanted, and Hasbro made a gargantuan amount of Star Wars product because everybody in the universe thought this was going to be the biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out to be not the biggest thing ever. So what was made, though, was like a massive amount of Star Wars. Like to this day, no year has had so much Star Wars product made. And I'm going to kind of use my hands to show something. So
yeah,
but I got to line it up for the camera. So Hasbro retailers wanted like, maybe this much Star Wars. Hasbro thought this thing's going to be great. We're going to make this much Star Wars. And consumers actually wanted like this much Star Wars. So there was so much product at retail and so much product in Hasbro's warehouses left over that had to be clearanced out that it was a financial disaster. That's in part because that's how I got my job. So up to that point in around the end of 2000, Hasbro was managing Star Wars out of the Cincinnati office, formerly known as Kenner. So Hasbro bought Kenner in the early 90s. All the boys' toys were shifted over there and run out of that Kenner division, Cincinnati. But because of the disaster that episode 1 was, they closed that office and moved everything to Rhode Island. So a lot of people who worked in Cincinnati, if you haven't been there, if you're raised there, it's an amazing place to live. Super affordable, very family friendly. People love it there. They didn't want to move to the more expensive, Rhode Island, kind of New England mentality, where people are kind of tough and independent there, and could be considered rude, but
I don't know anything about that living in Northwest PA. I don't know anything about
there. You go. Yeah. So a lot of people from that Cincinnati office didn't want to go to Rhode Island. So they said, no, we're just going to stay here. We'll find other jobs. So a whole bunch of jobs opened up. That's when I got the call to interview for Hasbro. So they closed the office in early 2001. I got a call. It was to head up the G.I. Joe brand. And I had written a book on 12-inch G.I. Joe a couple of years earlier. Back in 99, I published my first book, The Collectible G.I. Joe. And so the president of Hasbro, Alan Hassenfeld, had read that book. He had a copy in his office.
That's cool.
And he had known I had interviewed with Kenner or Hasbro a couple of times in the ensuing years. So my name was kind of bubbling up. And I got a call from the director of the brand in Cincinnati saying, I want you to replace me in Rhode Island, and I'm putting your name in. And I said, this is great. So I had to go back and interview with Alan Hassenfeld because G.I. Joe was so important to Hasbro's legacy that I'm probably the only director in history who had to ever interview all the way up to, the president of the company to take over a job like that. Usually hires at that level, you don't meet the president until for a long time. But because G.I. Joe was so, he was so concerned about G.I. Joe, his father's legacy, his brother's legacy were all tied into G.I. Joe. He wanted to make sure it was in good hands. I interviewed with Alan. It was great. I got the job and I started. Now, when I came in, it was kind of in that, what do you call it? The cleanup period for episode 1. There was so much inventory. There was a glut. People really didn't hardly want to talk about Star Wars. So sorry, am I getting my years wrong? Yeah, it was starting to be the build up to 2002 and the release of Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Star Wars team was there doing their thing. I went over into G.I. Joe, but I was friendly with the guys, became friends with all the guys who ran Star Wars. But it was very clear that Hasbro's approach to Attack of the Clones was super different than it was for episode 1. They didn't want to have the same burn again. There was an event here. They could monetize it, but it was going to be more, I would say, light and polite versus the huge enthusiasm for episode 1 because they didn't want to get it burned. They didn't want it to mess up the finances. So it was a very small line, whereas episode 1 was like, they planned it for like this big. Episode 2 is going to be like this big, So we didn't see all the stuff as fans. We got some cool stuff, but it was more light, polite, and they did a good job. They managed it. Nobody got burned. and they kind of went on and they were able to, do some follow-up lines afterwards, just some new figure lines just to keep fans going. But it was never like a big emphasis. Flash forward to episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So you've had 2 prior movies. One was too big and a disaster. The other one was probably light and polite, maybe too small. Star Wars maybe could have been a bigger line.
Right.
So let's find the right balance here. So when I came into the brand in 2004, preparing for the 2005 launch, it was all about kind of landing that plane right. Like, let's ship as much as we can, but not go over, because what we want is there to be a good appetite in that year after.
Find the sweet spot.
A lot of the sweet spot. And luckily, this is kind of what I was made for. I came from a quantitative research background, my years in research. I was very quantitative, tied in with the ops team there, really learned how the operations system worked at Hasbro. And I spent a lot of my time just really carefully figuring out like how much of each assortment we were going to be able to do. How many lightsabers are we going to have? How many of this do we need? And we landed that plane. It was unbelievable. And what that did was I created a kind of a new framework within Hasbro for thinking about the future. What I basically did is I talked to our sales team, presented to the executives, and I said, look, Star Wars should not be something that after the movie year, we're just very happy we had a big movie year, and then we kind of just go light and polite. I said, there is a big demand for Star Wars, and if we feed it correctly, we could have just a big, we could do lots of Star Wars business every year from there on out. Nobody believed it. They're like, nope, Star Wars is boom or bust, pretty much. We'll be very happy with we did what we did, and then we'll move on to the next things. Being the fan I was, I'm like, no, we can. We're going to show that. We're going to show the company that there'll be that appetite afterwards, so we can keep doing great stuff every year. And I created a metaphor called it was simple. It was like, the taller the building, the longer the shadow. And basically, it meant was, if we do our jobs right and we just fuel that demand during that episode 3 year, the shadow effect is going to be big. It's like people are just going to want and collect and consume Star Wars, especially because the toys were getting so good. That's where we really started to do that super articulated figure during that episode, that episode 3 line. Revenge of the Sith, we had a super articulated clone that, when we previewed it, people were going nuts for. So
I know all about it.
We really started to push that, that beautiful combination of sculpting accuracy, likeness accuracy, with articulation and functional utility. We had some great vehicles to work with, and the company said, okay, we're gonna give you some rope to hang. The team can hang itself with, but we did it. We managed through that, and because of that, the follow-up years to Star Wars weren't shallow years like they were, before, after episode 1 or episode 2. And they became very big years. We were able to just keep doing new stuff. Back to your original question, Tommy. Part of the kind of the pipeline that we filled Star Wars with was new approaches to product types that really hadn't, they'd maybe been tried in the market before, but they weren't like regular things. One of those was battle packs. So with battle packs, we kind of realized that we could have like a great birthday gift present, something that's easy to get, easy to package, super value. The value was apparent to, any consumer that looked at it. Any kid who got it would be going like, wow, that's, this is great. It's like a whole story in a box. And that's really how we approached it. Is we want to tell a story in that box. We're able to, because of the one price, one package, it will give a lot of value. And that was key to that. And battle packs became one of our biggest success stories, I think, for the next almost 10 years that followed. Is theming things around a story, putting a lot of value in there. And for me, I either wanted like a lot of newness in there, like everything was new. There was new deco on everything, or maybe some new figures in there, or nothing was new. It was just pure repacks. If you already had the figures and you were a collector, you could avoid those. Or it was a troop builder, concept, like the ones that you picked up. Yeah. To me, they were awesome troop builders. Anybody would get that and be like so happy that they got like an instant army full of guys. And the packaging team, headed up by Dave Reeves, nailed those battle packs, and especially the ones that you had, because it had that beautiful Republic gunship on it. I remember sitting there. It was one of my ideas on how we could do this battle pack, create that kind of gunship feel, lay them out like that. And the packaging team absolutely nailed that. They did such a great job with that. Long answer to a very short question.
and I love hearing all the extra, that you're putting into these answers, because this is the stuff that myself and all my friends love to talk about. It's kind of funny because I feel like, in a way, my generation is kind of being handed the torch for Star Wars collecting.
Yeah.
In my opinion, as adults, I think that people in their mid 20s to 30s now are really stepping up the game when it comes to what they collect, how they collect. I know for myself and so many friends, it started as just Black Series. That's kind of how we got back into collecting, and now it's like
it was your gateway.
And now I'm going to buy all the things I had as a kid, and I want them in the packaging, and I want them loose. I want the 30th anniversary. I want the Clone Wars. And it's really cool to see. I have, there's a show that I do called Toy Chest with another YouTube channel called Sarlacc Digest. They're based out of Southern California. And those guys are your age, and they have me on the show, and we're so similar. It's just that we mainly collect different eras of Star Wars, but the idea of collecting and the mentality of it, the volume of it, is all the same, and we can really connect in that way. And it's become a generational phenomena, and I really feel like Star Wars is going to do really well for the next 5-10 years because of this next generation of collectors that are kind of, like I said, being handed the torch. So, I mean, I think so. Things like the battle packs, though, it's because of that stuff that my generation is so into Star Wars and so into collecting the stuff. So myself and my friends, we have to thank you and the team back then for doing such a good job with the marketing on those.
Well, I will tell you that first of all, it was awesome meeting you and your dad and your buddies, but it was a day that I knew was coming. So. And it is here. So when I was at Hasbro, I used to talk about something called the 20-year rule of collecting. And I don't know where I got this. It's probably out there. I know a lot of books have been written about the psychology of collecting and whatnot. My point of view was always, when I was kind of reacquainted in my 20s with collecting, my early 20s, it was with a mindset of why am I going back and collecting, and why is a whole generation, my generation, why are they starting to collect too? And it ties back to, it's the fun things of your youth are often the things that make us smile, gives us warm memories, especially, when you had a great time playing with something.
Right.
Those were the days. I don't know how you played, Tommy, you can tell me, but when I played G.I. Joe and later with Star Wars, I was creating my own stories. I wasn't necessarily recreating what was on the screen for Luke and the team. I wanted kind of new adventures. I wanted to go beyond. And all my G.I. Joe and Star Wars playing were what's called, now I've come to call, personal storytelling, right? Hasbro and Kenner were giving me the tools to create my own adventures, and those never left me. I have such vivid memories of just playing, the stories I was making, the environments I was building to help facilitate that. Great feeling. So when my thesis was basically when people get into their early 20s, maybe they're out of college, kind of realizing the work-a-day world, dealing with other people kind of sucks.
Yeah.
That's not where you're going to really recharge your batteries necessarily. It's work. It's kind of draining for a lot of people. We weren't meant to be, we're animals. We weren't meant to be in cubicles all day long. So what makes you really happy? A lot of times, if you had a great childhood, loved your toys, that somehow you get reacquainted with that. And that's really those key years in your 20s, maybe into the early 30s, when people start to become collectors again, fondly remembering the things from their childhood. It happens with every generation. Before me, there were train collectors and playset collectors and Barbie collectors. All kinds of collectors do the exact same thing. So for us, you're just, between you and me span the generation of kids who grew up with, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Power Rangers, or, all of the
that.
He-Man, all those things in between, the G.I. Joe 3 and 3/4 line. Every generation, the kids kind of come on, on call, like you're talking about, and things, become collectible. They start chasing down the rare things, and that, those things bubble up to the top. So what you're seeing is something that I predicted with our team when we were at Hasbro, and, talking about the 20-year rule. We would look and say, 20 years ago, this was happening. We really need to plan for this, whether it was, one of the things we did in the 2000s line was a real focus on Return of the Jedi, because we said people are going to want, people actually love Ewoks. Return of the Jedi used to be very maligned as a Star Wars film because it was, it felt like it was too kiddie. It was a sellout. But 20 years later, people were like, man, the Ewoks were badass. They were so cool. Look, they were roasting stormtroopers or whatever they were doing. They were real fighters. So we put a real emphasis on trying to do as many Ewoks as possible. Really all the pilots involved in all the battles. So we were always looking and saying, what's coming up? What are people, nostalgic about? Because we want to have that focus. And so I remember saying, 20 years from now, it's going to be this Clone Wars stuff, guys. This is the future. And, meeting you and your friends at ICC was like really the first time going, man, the future is here. I feel old, but it's a new generation of fans, and it absolutely is. So that's, that's what what people really seem to be, appreciating is that, Clone Wars era stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I would play, my two biggest lines that I collected, I guess, as a kid would be the Star Wars 30th anniversary figures. We called them the coin characters when I was a kid. And I had the big binder, and I would collect all the Jabba's denizens from Return of the Jedi and get all the coins. And then I also was heavy into the Star Wars: The Clone Wars animated figures from 2008. I remember as a kid, like you were saying, making your own adventures. My favorite scenario to play out was I had the ATTE playset for the Clone Wars, and I'd have that as like their mobile base, and Cad Bane would be attacking with the battle droids, and they would just do the scenario would change a little bit every time, but in general, that was how it went. And it's exactly stuff like that. It's, for me and all my friends that I talk to that are my age, it's everyone created their own scenarios, and you grow a fondness for certain action figures. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I love Luke Skywalker, I'm going to buy Luke Skywalker figures. It's like, no, I loved this action figure when I was a kid, so now I'm going to buy every new version and every old version of that character. So it's really something special.
That's awesome. And every year we made a focus. We wanted to have that feature Christmas item, that hero item that we knew we were going to put on TV. And we made it every year to be like a playset, like big central vehicle. So we put our emphasis there. And sometimes we had two, years where we had two, like the big Millennium Falcon or the AT-AT, along with a Clone Wars, vehicle too. So I'm so glad to hear you, talk about that. That was like central to your play, because that was always central to our focus too. And luckily with Clone Wars, Lucasfilm really worked with us. I mean, they knew what we could do. We weren't allowed to actually talk to the writers or, interface really with the production team. That was always very, very separated. But Lucasfilm licensing, the LFL, that little LFL you see on all the figures and things like that, they were really the go-between. They brought us out yearly to listen to the pitch of what the Clone Wars team, Dave Filoni and his team, were going to be doing for that year. We'd be writing furiously, like, okay, did he really say we're going to see a new kind of, clone fighter? So we got to get details on that, So, and I was particularly paying attention to those vehicles that we could, place our bets around, and the new planets and new clones and new Jedi, all of that we took to heart. And then as Lucasfilm got those assets, they would share them with us so we could build our line and be as close to the airing of those episodes as possible. That was always the goal. it was kind of never the reality. Sometimes toys, take longer to make than you want, or, there are key plot points that, the team wanted to make sure that they kept under wraps so there weren't surprises, because I remember Savage Opress being one of those. It's like, wow, this is a huge character in the story. We wanted to try and get that out as closely as possible, but we didn't want to risk like spoiling anything. So that was, a few things were just like kept a little closer under wraps like that. But otherwise, it was a great relationship where while we couldn't, we didn't talk to the team directly, we were able to just get as much information as possible so we could just plan out a great year. And they always did share scripts with us. So, we could read them ahead of time and make fine tweaks to our product line. It's just a great relationship.
That's really cool. So I guess that would kind of lead me into another question that I have. So a lot of us in the collecting community, there's a lot of speculation about what characters get made into figures first, like what kinds of characters get chosen. So I don't know if this is different post the Disney acquisition of the franchise. What's it like, if you can tell me anything at all about, does Disney give you like a list, or Lucasfilm or whatever, and say these are the characters that you can make into action figures this year? Or do they have like focuses and you guys get to pick anything, or how does that process kind of work?
That's an awesome question. So I'll kind of start back to my time. I don't know how it is now.
Okay.
Although I kind of have an intuitive sense of how it works now.
Okay.
Lucasfilm has a lot of entertainment and development. Hasbro only has, so many slots they can do. So the emphasis is going to be on which characters are playing the biggest role, in these, in the, whether it's a TV series or, we haven't had movies in a while, but, which characters are going to be most important. We want to make sure we cull those. But Hasbro also has a very difficult task on their hands. They have to cater to not only the original fans of the original trilogy movies like me, but also to fans like you who, grew up in Clone Wars, and maybe, there's figures that are underserved, or like the Rebels figures have been an emphasis in recent years.
Yeah.
That's because fans are demanding, to get those figures. So Hasbro has so much of a wealth of not only, current entertainment, but also the back catalog of things to do, figures they want to update, that, they're never going to be able to satisfy all the audiences, right? There's too many things. So as a Cantina Alien fan, well, first of all, I was thrilled to see the HasLab for the, the Cantina.
Yeah.
But I want to see every year, multiple Cantina aliens so I can stick them in my Cantina. So that's my dream. The reality is, if we get one every other year, we're probably, that's all
never going to get there.
Just because they have so many slots to go around. Back in my day, I'll sound like old man, and I moved off the Star Wars team at the beginning of, I want to say, it might have been 2015, I think, something like that. So my sunset, just to finish my little arc there, the beginning of my involvement in the Star Wars team was just right before Episode 3 launched, and my sunset was putting the line plan and the toys to bed for The Force Awakens.
Okay.
So the first JJ film of the new trilogy. So that was kind of my arc, and I felt like, wow, this is kind of it was a great time to jump on, beginning of that last movie, and then
a great time to abandon ship.
Yep, and it was like the same time point in in the new movie. I thought, my arc is done, and I took a break and came back and did some other stuff. But anyway, but during those years, so I love those years. But the way we approached our product line was pretty much with a blank slate. So we started a process in the years after Episode 3, where there was no entertainment coming. But we created this process to talk with Lucasfilm about, and I'll pay particular attention to the basic figure waves. So the basic figures are what we call the characters that are on the 6x9 card.
Yeah.
Okay, it's kind of the bread and butter of your waves. Everybody called them, the basic figure waves. We actually had, we had a couple back then, but I'll get to that in a moment. But and you start with a blank canvas. So what are we going to do this year? And typically what we do is we have a product meeting first at Hasbro with our teams and say, bring your ideas for, what basic figures you want to see in the line. And everybody is particularly concerned about basic figures because that is the thing that's front and center that most fans collect, that people talk about. So we wanted to make sure that we really nail that line. And so we would have a meeting. I would have a long list of things because I would review all the films, all the TV. I would read all the Marvel comics, and Dark Horse was doing Star Wars comics at the time. I'd read everything, and I would have a long list of figures we could do. And then we would suggest, we would have a meeting. We would all kind of lay things out and start to put all the figures we thought we could do in there, and then start to design waves based on those. So it was a lot of participation from the team. I was probably a little bit more aggressive in what I felt we should do than others. But so I don't want to say more of my figures got in there, but I always had a good idea of, we kept what I call a parking lot, which is like every time somebody said, hey, we've never done like this version of R2-D2 where he's covered with grime from this scene, or hey, there's this Luke from Empire Strikes Back where he's actually got different colored pants or something like it's a different Luke. And I remember one time I was watching Empire Strikes Back and I'm going, wait a minute, we never did Han with that long coat and he's got that welding thing. I'm like, I can't believe it. There's a Han Solo that we've never ever produced in figures before. So we would take things like that, put them in a parking lot, and then when we did our line plan, kind of pull them out. So cool. It's kind of like we kept ideas as the year went on, did our parking lot. But the challenge became, so we would suggest a lot of stuff, and I knew intuitively like how to wave figures. Mm-hmm. My ideal was we produce a wave of figures, and they were in case packs of 12. Okay. So back then, we were able to work with a case pack of 12. Now it's like 6 because Walmart cut down the pegs, and it's very difficult when you're working with smaller numbers to actually manage waves. When you're working with like 12 characters in a master carton, it's glorious because what you can do, it means one, your volume is pretty high, so you're generating, you're making good quantities of figures out there. Your factory is happy because even the most obscure figure, you're hitting their minimum order requirements, you're flying over that. So, because you always have a deal with your factory, they'll give you the pricing if you're hitting their numbers, right? Or, if you're hitting big numbers, they'll give you the favorable pricing. And then, everything works because you're making the profits you need to keep your Hasbro finance team happy. The factory's happy. They're producing everything. And so back then, we knew the amount of collectors we had in the market because we were able to see how many we were selling. We had great Walmart data from Walmart that told us like what each figure was selling. And so we would design the lines, those case packs, to the most obscure figure would just be one guy in that case pack of 12.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. We'd make that figure once and then we would move beyond them and never do that again. So we came to call that with Lucasfilm. So the trick when you're designing a line is like, where's the objectivity and how good these figures are? How many are you going to make? Mm-hmm. And I always said that we will never die on the vine with making too many Darth Vaders, right? We could make endless Darth Vaders. They always sold out. We've never, ever had a problem with Darth Vaders on the shelf. So I always knew at the beginning of any line year, every year we change the packaging, right? To kind of make it fresh and new and collectible again. And so we always had a wave one. And I wanted my wave one of that new package, that new line, like stocked with all-stars. I wanted a new Darth Vader if we had one. I wanted it if there was a new take on a key clone trooper, if there was a new Luke we haven't done, or, a new Obi-Wan. And so we had our all-stars that we put in there. And if we had those in that wave one, then I could always count on carrying them forward into future waves. Gotcha. Like I could always re-release a Darth Vader. And that would allow me to, not have to tool up a new character for that future wave because we only had so much tooling to go on, tooling dollars. But it would allow me to kind of gate in those obscure figures. And so that's how we designed our waves, is we would come up with a list, chunk them into waves, make sure that we packed our all-stars at the beginning, because then they would be something that we were confident we're going to sell, and that would help get in those obscure figures, in subsequent waves.
Okay. It's cool to hear that process, because I feel like that's the thing that us as collectors, especially like a lot of people my age, we all do these like YouTube channels and these shows, and we're always talking and speculating and things like that. So to have these conversations on a medium like this is great, because now I'm like, and now my friends have the answer, and we could finally stop talking about it. Like,
I only gave you part of the question. I actually didn't answer your question.
Okay.
I gave you part of it, and that's my thing. I apologize. There's so much detail, involved in this.
Well, and again, I love hearing about it. So
the Lucasfilm part was key. So I just talked about how Hasbro, we have our meeting, we kind of design everything out on a line plan.
Right.
But Lucasfilm is a partner at the table too. They're not there during those initial brainstorms that we have, but instead we propose our line to Lucasfilm and say, this is what we want to do. Lucasfilm comes at it with their own perspective, and they say, well, we think you should put a focus on this, or this is coming, or where's this character we talked about? It might, if it was a Clone Wars wave or something like that. But oftentimes with Lucas, especially in those early days, there was more of a subjectivity to the discussions. Like, well, I really don't think, Aunt Beru and Owen Lars are characters that fans want.
Right.
You should really do, another Ewok or something like that, just as an example. And sometimes when you go into these line plan discussions, that's where the subjectivity comes out. Like, I'll always have my favorites. I want Cantina aliens, and I would try, I would love to see a year where we have 2 or 3 Cantina aliens in a wave, but that's not prudent, right? It's not smart, because those characters only sell a certain amount. It's going to be our lowest ranking characters, what we came to call like collector only characters. Like, no kids want those Cantina aliens. So it's irresponsible when you're running a Star Wars line to put too many of those figures in there, because you may get your wish, like, hey, you're getting a lot of Cantina aliens out there, but it comes at the expense of really cutting your sales and risking all those figures like kind of piling up on the shelves.
Right.
So it always became a balance. And this is the beauty of the Hasbro Lucasfilm relationship. They would come in, kind of really test and say, like, we think you have too many obscure figures, or, you should really put a focus on this. This is what we want. In those early days, it was that subjectivity. And what we wanted to do was put an objective framework that everybody could agree to behind our wave design.
Yeah.
And so we created this framework where we broke down kind of quantitatively what figures would sell. And we started to call figures like A-level figures, B-level figures, C-level figures, which are those collector only one and dones level, and there may have been like little gradations in between, but we knew confidently that the A-level figures we could just put in a lot of subsequent waves. B-level figures would be stronger than just one wave, and a B-level figure, a good example of an A-level figure would be any Anakin or any modern Obi-Wan figure, not Obi-Wan from A New Hope, in the original Star Wars. That's more of a B-level character. But any of the new Jedi, Darth Vader's, any Stormtrooper, any kind of generic clone trooper is an A figure. A few figures are like A pluses, like Darth Vader, some new super articulated clone, for example, A plus, because the army builders would just pick up tons of those. So we had A, B, and then C level characters, and then we designed our waves around that. We said in every wave of 12, we would want to have like 4 or 5 slots of A's, 3 or 4 slots of B's, and that would allow us to get a couple of slots of those C level characters in there. And then with Lucasfilm, that was a breakthrough moment in our kind of wave designing when we came up with this formula, because we would show the formula. We would say these characters fit this, based on prior sales data for like characters. Lucasfilm would look at that and go, okay, we agree with your ratings. And it made those discussions of how we do our waves and our cadence of figures a lot easier.
Oh my.
And so So we used that up until, for the 10 years that I was on Star Wars. I don't know what they do now, but that was a great framework for us. It made things so easy to talk about, very objective. And it made that, that just partnership with Lucasfilm just work like clockwork. And so those were the basic figures. And then kind of everything else around that, we had, the same kind of framework, but it made it very easy to talk about. And we launched things like the comic packs, and we kept doing battle packs and, things like that. And as long as they were selling, those conversations became really easy.
Yeah, that's something, again, I keep bringing up the Black Series line because that's a line I actively collect and I try to be very knowledgeable on. Recently, they did something called what they were calling A-list figures, A-listers. They released a Din Djarin, a Darth Vader, and a Paz Vizsla, the heavy infantry Mandalorian, at all your Walmarts and Targets in just different packaging, and said, these are going to be our A-lister figures. They're pretty much just repacks, but they're main characters. And when you said that just now, that was the first thing that popped in my head. I was like, okay, so obviously they still have the idea of that formula in mind when they're trying to figure out what goes to the major retailers, as opposed to just recently the Sebulba that just got released for only pretty much like Big Bad Toy Store, GameStop, your more collector focused market.
That's right.
Again, that's totally like you're saying. That seems to me more like a C tier character.
Yep.
Very unique, but also very niche. Yeah.
Yep. And those are the kind of things that always, and there is a market for those. So, in our time, we had Entertainment Earth as a big customer that stepped up, and the online retailers of today are very savvy. They're seeing where there's an opportunity and grab something that they know that they can handle, that Hasbro considers a lower volume item, but for them, it's a good statement to have, and you're the only place you can get it. So, and because the demand, for Star Wars, the affinity for Star Wars is high enough that they know that people will come there and take away those figures. So they can kind of win with those. And that was always been has always been the approach, very consistent with, kind of the fan channel, kind of things like those more obscure things can do really well there.
Yeah. So kind of, I guess, to talk about the Black Series a little bit, because you were with the Star Wars team when that line launched.
That's right.
So there is, I talked to you quite extensively at ICCCon about the Black Series and like the launch of the line.
Yeah. So I launched the Black Series along with my design counterpart there. Basically, I remember kind of the morning at Hasbro that I basically said, it's time. Let's do this. It's not that it was a novel idea to do Star Wars 6-inch figures. We had presented it or looked at it, considered it before, years before, especially given the success of Marvel Legends. Marvel Legends, massively popular line, created by originally by Toy Biz, but brought into the Hasbro building with the acquisition of the Marvel license in the, I want to say, probably the mid 2000s, mid to late 2000s. Anyway, they were doing a great job with it. We saw the guys there, Dwight Stahl on the Marvel Legends team, just doing amazing 6-inch figures. I'm also a Marvel Legends collector, so I've always known how great Star Wars figures would look in that scale. But at the time we launched Black Series, I was concerned because we had been having struggles with our 3 3/4 line. There was a collector contraction coming down. I think it was in 2008. A lot of people may remember there's a financial meltdown in the real estate market.
What are you talking about? I don't know.
And that was really a shock for a lot of older collectors. It's no secret, a lot of collectors probably spend more than they should on toys, to fill their rooms. And in 2008, a lot of people were really worried that they weren't going to make their rent payment, or their mortgage payment, and they cut back. And we saw that effect almost immediately in our lines in 2008. This was right after the Clone Wars started. And our Clone Wars really wasn't affected like other lines were. Some of the other lines, like comic packs and some of the bigger sets we might do, those were kind of the first casualties, because they weren't really tied to the current entertainment. They weren't things you necessarily were getting for kids. They were pure, like almost collector plays. Those were the first casualties. Sales started to trail off. A lot of the other lines we were making kind of took a hit. Like I remember we used to make this line called Unleashed Battle Packs. They were little kind of
I had those. Those were
pre-posed cool guys, little pre-made armies in a box. Those started to suffer because they weren't really core. They weren't 3 3/4.
Right.
So we really started to take a haircut, and that continued into 2009 and 2010 as a lot of collectors just withdrew. So, our numbers were getting hit kind of across the board, and we were looking for literally like what's going to kind of recatalyze interest in the brand. So we were, having to cut off some of our SKUs because we just couldn't hit those manufacturing numbers anymore. Retail was starting to get kind of clogged up with things.
Okay.
And so we knew that Star Wars 6-inch was there to catalyze. I had always been afraid it was kind of, going to just immediately suck money away from our 3 3/4 line. And I know that the collecting core for 3 3/4 is all about world building. It's such a critical thing. Vehicles are so important to the line. Figures are so important to the line. So I was afraid that the focus on 6-inch and all the new tooling that we required to start it up, that was all going to come out of 3 3/4. Our budget for 3 3/4, and it turned out that was true. There was an effect. But it was the right thing to do because it recatalyzed interest in Star Wars. It actually brought in, like you said, Tommy, a lot of new collectors who maybe were on the sidelines, who weren't in it before, but were looking for a way to start fresh. The other aspect of once you get to a line like we had by, 2010, 2011, like it was almost impossible to be a completist in Star Wars because thousands of figures had been made. And we'd made so many vehicles. I mean, if you're a completist for Star Wars, you're in for a real challenge. But like very few new collectors were kind of jumping in with that mentality of trying to collect everything because it was literally impossible. And what Black Series did was allowed like a fresh start. Like if you love Star Wars, here you can jump in. Here's wave 1. Just a brand new line. You don't have to worry about everything that went in the past. You can just show your love for these characters in first of all, the most fantastic figure we've done. And, fresh start, manageable collection. We're not going to make too many because the cost, the tooling cost is so high on those that we're not going to,
because of the scale being bigger?
Because the scale is bigger.
Okay.
Actually, the funny thing is it doesn't cost that much more to tool up a Black Series 6-inch figure than it does a 3 3/4 figure.
Okay.
The way it works is the way what we call it cutting steel for figures works is, literally there's a block of steel, and then the craftsman will basically cut out the manufacturable pieces of that character out of it. Usually it's machine cut now. It used to be more hand cut, but and so a block that may have the pieces of a 6-inch figure may be like this big, but 3 3/4 might be this big. So it's not that much more steel. It's a little bit scaled up, but there is kind of an efficiency, with the size, and it takes almost the same probably amount of touches to manufacture a 6-inch figure as a 3 3/4 figure, but more paint, more deco. So
right. Okay, that's where it is.
More expensive. Sometimes more soft goods and things like that. So the cost does scale, but because the 6-inch line is pretty much all new, it's like every figure we were doing in that line was a brand new tool, and that's a lot of money. And the 3 3/4 figure wasn't like that. We could use a lot of our existing library, so we knew that the library for Star Wars was going to pay off over time. We'd be able to reuse those figures, especially clones and troopers and things like that. We could re-release, redeco. Whereas the Marvel Legends team, has kind of a different aspect to their line. They've got a lot of generic bodies and generic limbs and things that they can use over and over and over
just
again.
Beat 'em up.
Yep. Star Wars, totally different because everything is dedicated. That generic aspect isn't there except for the trooper redecos or the occasional C-3PO that gets turned into, what's the anyway, a different kind of a different protocol droid, a silver droid.
Yeah, I get you.
So there's very little reuse. So the droids are also a good example. You can get a lot of reuse out of those bodies, but overall, it's a very expensive line to start up. So it did suck a lot of interest over, but it brought a lot of new fans in. And so I think Star Wars 3 3/4, it was struggling anyway. And then, it really struggled for a few years after that, to the extent that 3 3/4 was really folded in to the Black Series for a while.
Yeah. So with that, I don't want to say the profit margins, but so did Black Series help the 3 3/4 stay alive then, or did it take away from it a little bit there?
The Black Series definitely it definitely hurt 3 3/4.
Okay.
For a while, but I will say 3 3/4 was struggling anyway.
Okay.
We were struggling with rising costs at the time. Costs are really increasing. And so we were trying to figure out, that's where you see things like the battle packs, which had been a mainstay of the line, the ones that you showed, the Republic gunship ones and things like that. We, over time, to maintain that magic $20 price point, we had to do a lot of stuff like take away figures, shrink the package, make the background less, complex, things like that were really pulling production cost out of that to try and maintain that still same giftable, value pack, basically. That's what we call it. They were value packs in all those battle packs. And so you just see over time how we were trying to maintain our margins by heroically trying to reconfigure that product as much as possible, to the extent where by the time we got to 2012, it was just a little flat strip of three characters. That's how much our costs were increasing.
Wow.
And so 3 3/4, we were really struggling. The prices were increasing. Consumers were just incensed that, we were approaching maybe $10 a piece on a basic figure, which now seems like a bargain, right?
It's like what, $18 now?
Just 10 years ago, collectors were up in arms at how much we were, they thought we were gouging them for figures, but that was the cost of staying alive with increasing labor costs, and like everything was going up. So, we were just trying to save the line, but the writing was on the wall that we had to really look at 3 3/4. And that's why we did the line where we took out a lot of articulation, kind of went back to kind of just simple figures the way Kenner had manufactured them, but with better sculpting.
So that's why Hasbro went back to the 5 POA. I always wondered why 3 3/4 returned to 5 POA. Okay, that makes total sense now.
We did it because it greatly simplified, the manufacturing, which simplified the cost. My belief was always, and I love 5 POA. I'm a big fan, which is ironically because I'm the guy who's pushing for more and more articulation as well. But a couple things were going on. I was getting consumer affairs complaints. I may have told you this at ICCC, but we were getting consumer feedback from our consumer care, Hasbro consumer care division, about moms saying, how can I get a bag of replacement hands for my son's clone troopers, because they've all fallen out and gotten lost, and we were making these really articulated figures that, you could move, the wrist would move in every direction, but a little bit of force will just pop that ball right off the hand, and the kid loses the figure and the gun. That gun, Tommy, that you were so precious about, never having been separated from the figure. It was gone.
Yeah.
And so we were getting these complaints, and I was reading our complaints and going, we've gone too far, right? We have made these not playable. And we were also seeing the same thing in our in-home visits that we were doing. So we always, every year we went out on in-home visits to do, kind of research with our users on how they actually used our toys, how they collected them, how they displayed them, how they used them. We were seeing the same thing. We're seeing incomplete figures that, were just new, just a couple months ago, useless. So with that in mind, that maybe we tipped the scales a little too far, and going back to what the roots of Star Wars were, which is a world, 3 3/4 Star Wars is about world building. It's about being able to get enough characters for that storytelling, that personal storytelling, getting vehicles, getting everything that you have, like a complete world of Star Wars. We reset all the prices. So We went to
Okay.
5 POA, so I was instrumental in helping lead that charge, and the team wanted to do that too. And we kind of, we wanted to get vehicles back to $20, a nice giftable price point. So, Mark Boudreau on the Star Wars team, legendary vehicle designer, figured out that we could kind of hollow out the bottom of the vehicles and save a lot of money, deliver that vehicle. It's not the quality the collectors had loved for, their vehicles during the Clone Wars line, but it was necessary to
keep it going,
delivering, that play experience. And so that line existed for a few years through a couple of movies there. And I thought it was great. So I was kind of sad that it went away. I'm seeing it's back now. It's at, that that line is back at Target.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, back at it's, national retail play, but Walmart's got, some special things in that line too. So I consume those. I like them. I think they're great.
What is it? You talking about the Epic Hero line?
Yeah, the Epic Hero line.
Yeah, I saw they just added recently. They're doing a Mandalorian with a swoop bike that has bendy knees now too. So
yeah. And I hope that line does great, because I think the future's there. It's all about keeping price points where they need to be to make the line consumable. Yeah. And kids aren't playing figures, playing with action figures like they're used to. That is
true.
Big shock to people, but if anything has the chance to be, to be giftable and consumable and kind of help a kid grow, kind of do their own storytelling, by getting several things together, that I think is the line that has potential. So I hope Hasbro gets the battle pack idea and is able to deliver some things that make a great gift to, kind of give kids a real kick. That's awesome. A lot of value in one box.
So I have some of these questions come from friends of mine that we are, again, avid Black Series collectors. It's the thing that, when a new figure gets revealed, we're locking in when we got to go pre-order the figure, where we got to go. So and because you helped launch the line, some of these questions I have are coming from friends of mine that they were like, I told them I was having you on my YouTube channel, and they're like, please ask this question for me. I'm dying to have this question answered. So the first one I have to ask, because this is famously debated on YouTube channels all across that I'm friends with all across YouTube here for years now. So this question comes from the Zoo Boy, is his screen name, Michael, from a show called Monday Night Figure Ball. They were with us at ICC Con. I don't know if you met them, but Michael wanted to know, there's this theory that goes around with the Black Series called the definitive figure theory. Okay. So when the line got launched, the initial blurb in 2013 was, it will be the definitive look for every character in Star Wars. So there's this theory that Hasbro will never do the exact same look from the exact same scene of a character twice because of that initial blurb. Is that true, or is it just coincidence that almost every figure never gets the same look twice?
I will tell you, so that was over 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And I think the team has turned over on Star Wars, if not completely once, maybe twice in that time. And it's a totally different team. I don't even know the people who are managing the Star Wars line today. But I will tell you that they very rarely ever inherit, any tenets, I will say, of the past line. They're always making decisions in the best interest of the line today. And when I mean the best interest of the line, it's when you work on a branded Hasbro, it's like you are partnered with a bank, almost, right? A bank that employs you and is going to fire you if you. No, they're not. But what you're doing is you're bringing a line to the company executives. You say, this is financially like the budget that you've given us. This is what we think we could do. So there's a budgeting process before it's all done. What do you guys think you can hit? What's coming up? What number do you want to put in? And then the executives will always say, knock it back. We don't believe it, or we want to be conservative about it, or, there's a new movie coming out that we're going to make room for in our budget, and whatever is coming out. So you have a budget you work against, and then in there you kind of, you kind of put all your different things together that you're going to use to get to that product line. You say we're going to do 20 million in lightsabers this year for kids. We're going to do 40 million in our figure line here. Black Series is going to be this, things like that. So it all bubbles up. I'm just making up numbers. These are not actual numbers.
Yeah.
Just using whole numbers that people could work with. But so let's say you had a certain Star Wars line. You're always going to budget that. Well, as each year goes on, the line either is a hit, and maybe you're doing more of that, or less of it. You have to cut it back, but you're always going to make decisions that are guided by what's going to be the best, in the best interest of our line. But at the same time, you want to keep your collectors in mind. Like this is what collectors have been saying about the line. Like we need to do these characters, or in some cases it may be that like, hey, we never really nailed Chewbacca when we first did the Black Series for some reason. Right. Like I'm just making it up. I don't know. Chewbacca may be a great character, great sculpt. I don't know. But if there's enough fan demand to say, hey, you really didn't nail this, or we think that the face sculpt could have been better, or whatever. Over time, the technology does get better to make better things. And when we first started Black Series, I don't think the digital printing had come into had been used. So there's one thing that immediately can make like a lot of things better, is that the digital printing technology. So it's definitely possible that over time the team could take advice from the fans, listen to the fans, and say we can take another approach to this and do that figure. But there are other cases where the figures may never be done, and that's what they're doing. What I guess you call the A-list series. They say we don't need to do this. This is definitive and it's done. So I would say definitive can be subjective because things can change. Technology can change. You can really think it's the best, but at the back of your mind you can do better. And I think that each team is probably going to say, the fans will give us permission if we redo this figure because it will be a better figure.
Okay.
Right. And because you're always constantly changing your packaging, your line look, there is that inherent permissibility, I think, to do that. But as far as I know, I don't think there's any tenet that says we cannot violate that first year of, or whatever we initially said, that we can never, ever approach this figure again. So, and I don't know, you tell me, Tommy. So I'm not actually a Black Series collector myself. Okay. I'm a 3 3/4 completist, and slavishly dedicated to 3 3/4. So okay. I don't know. Has Hasbro reapproached figures at all, and kind of updated ones that we had said during my time that were definitive, or have they pretty much left them alone?
So the conspiracy theory has especially this year, it's kind of come into question a little bit, because and then people start jumping through mental gymnastics with it, like you said. So they did the clone trooper from Attack of the Clones right at the beginning. And then in 2020, they made a new sculpt for the clone trooper. They redid it and marketed it as an Attack of the Clones clone trooper. Then in 2024, this year, we got another new, same exact look, marketed for the same exact movie. But people are saying, well, it still doesn't break the conspiracy theory because it's on a new sculpt. So it's kind of fun to jump through the mental gymnastics of it all.
I think fans they're trying to apologize for the team and still protect the team's tenet. But I would say, look, things change, and if fans want a better figure, I think Hasbro has the permission to do a better figure that, sure, that updates a figure. So I know they're sensitive, because some people who've been, collecting Black Series for the whole time may say, look, I don't need another Darth Vader from, A New Hope. You already did that. And, but if it has this time a removable helmet or something, I guess that would be a later version, a Return of the Jedi version. But, I think there's inherent permission in there to do that. I don't think they necessarily have to, adhere to something. But my take has always been, if you have that definitive Darth Vader and it's great, everybody loves it, you don't really need to go back in there, because then you do shake the faith of a few people. But if, like a clone trooper, you can make a substantially better clone trooper that can kneel, now it can hold a sniper position, or you get the wrists, to some way that can really hold the rifle, that's a better figure. You've got permission to do that in my mind. So I'd say there's freedom within the frame, but I like the fact that Hasbro is adhering to that frame. And as a result of that, you probably do get some apologists who say they're still adhering to that frame. But I would say the fact they made another clone trooper, they're deliberately saying that one wasn't the best we could do. We've got a better one we can do. And the idea is it replaces and updates that other one, because Hasbro's probably never going to release that other one. They're just going to release the new one, right? So that is a replacement for that early one.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that dude, I know Michael's going to be so happy. He that was, I think, everything and more that he ever wanted to hear about his conspiracy theory. But so I guess one last question before I kind of rifle off just some quicker questions other people had for me to ask you is the HasLab projects. So the HasLabs have been huge. I'm very excited. My Ghost is coming in before Christmas.
Yep.
That's what's going around right now.
I just saw they charged my card.
Yep. My email came in about, make sure you have the shipping date correct. And then I know that Black Series has tried it technically twice. So I know that they did. This is an infamous topic within the Black Series community, is the Rancor. And then they also did, in my opinion, the roleplay items aren't technically Black Series, but they just are Black Series by name with the Riva lightsaber. With the Rancor, from your perspective, and I know we talked about it a little bit at ICCCon, what's your insight on the Rancor and why it failed, and as opposed to other HasLabs, which like the Vintage Collection, Razor Crest, and the Ghost have been hugely successful. What about that project? Because I feel like a Black Series HasLab could fund and could do amazing. I feel like the potential is there. What about the Rancor didn't stick the landing, in your opinion?
So there's a couple of things, and I do have opinions on this topic. So in the first years in my time, on Star Wars when we launched the Black Series, we didn't consider vehicles to be part of the line. We always thought the Black Series was going to be the ultimate tribute to the characters of Star Wars. We never said that. And obviously we never left vehicles aside, because vehicles are so critical to the world building aspect of Star Wars. But the feeling was that the 6-inch scale just isn't a vehicle scale. First of all, most of the Star Wars vehicles are actually, they take up a lot of volume, a lot of space. They're huge. The team did, this was after my time, the team did a TIE Fighter, thinking that this was going to be great. What a great vehicle to start with for Black Series fans. It was a disaster.
I heard.
So it sold so poorly. I think, you can still find it at, ridiculously cheap prices today, but it sold very poorly. Why? Indisputably an amazing product to have. So you have to go here to the psychology of the Black Series collector and the way that they collect. It's a combination of space, and likely a Black Series 6-inch collector isn't just collecting only Star Wars 6-inch figures.
Yes.
Probably you might have started with 6-inch with Marvel Legends or one of the other 6-inch lines. 6-inch is I consider it an art form for figure expression.
Okay.
It's a phenomenal scale.
I would agree.
Started by Marvel, by Toy Biz for the Marvel figures, that has become like the best expression of certain type of figures. In my opinion, it's the best scale for superheroes. My favorite, bar none. It's awesome. You get all that, so much character and musculature and things like that really make those figures great. I don't like 3 3/4 as much as I love 3 3/4. Don't like it for superheroes. Love 6-inch. So, but Marvel 6-inch has never been, Marvel's not really about mini vehicles anyway. Star Wars is. But for the fans who collect 6-inch figures, putting them on the shelves, the limited amount of space they may have in their house, those figures take up a lot of space. There's not a lot of room for vehicles. And when you go to display those things, what do you do with the TIE Fighter? It's almost like a coffee table, right? Might be bigger than a DTOLF shelf. I don't know, right? If you're going to make vehicles, you should make them fit in DTOLF shelves, right? that gets us back to the Rancor. So what role does the Rancor play in Star Wars, character universe building? It's a figure that I think a lot of fans thought they should be doing anyway. Like if Rancor is like almost like a character, less of a vehicle.
Yes, it is.
And it's like, just, you should do that and put it out on a shelf. So I think the reaction to the Rancor was as much, I don't have room for that, because I don't do vehicles. I didn't get the TIE fighter, and I'm sure not going to go get the Rancor, which is arguably less important than a TIE fighter, right? Or I'm mad at Hasbro for doing something that they should just do and put out and sell through Entertainment Earth or Big Bad or the Fan Channel or something like that. Even though it's bigger than any current retailer shelf can really handle. But why are you making that a HasLab? I think they were sending a signal that this isn't special enough for a HasLab. That's the third thing. HasLabs are for dream projects that could not exist any other way outside of that HasLab. And when you're doing a Rancor, you're sending a signal. You're saying Rancor will never exist outside of a HasLab, right? That's the only time. And to me, that's squarely a bring it to retail if you really, if you believe in that figure. It wasn't, they did a TIE fighter. Why wouldn't they, try the Rancor?
Yeah.
But they were trying the Rancor because of the failure of the TIE fighter. So Hasbro's message, not directly stated to us, was, the only way you're going to get these bigger things in Black Series is by supporting it like this. And fans were going, it's not, I think it's not special enough that I'm going to step up and support this, for a variety of reasons. Partly also because a lot of fans just have said, figures is the focus. I can't handle these other bigger things. So. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did a video recently on my channel. I called it a HasLab pitch for the Black Series. It was because Revenge of the Sith 20th anniversary is next year. I pitched this idea. I gave all the tiers, the pricing, the scale. I measured everything out for 6-inch for Anakin and Obi-Wan's Jedi Interceptors from the opening scene of the movie. I did all the stretch goals, like the tiers, how many backers you'd need for each tier. And videos like that do really well online. And that is probably one of the only Black Series HasLab projects that I think would actually fully fund and Black Series collectors could get behind, because it's like you get both the ships. And I also think I threw something in there where you could choose one or the other, because they've been doing that recently where they do like a deluxe HasLab versus just a classic version. And I got a lot of good feedback on it. A lot of people really like that type of a video. Obviously I have other ones in mind, but I remember with the Rancor, from the community aspect, like I think there were like a handful of people. I think it was like I don't know if you're familiar with the Out of the Basement YouTube channel, or it was Mike Case is another YouTube channel, that they were like the only ones online that were saying, I'm going to back the Rancor. I think this is a good project. A lot of people were, collectors especially, disenfranchised. You hit the nail on the head. The scale for what they were getting. And a lot of people felt that $350 for a Rancor and they didn't feel like the stretch goals were enough to make them want that Rancor more. And so I think that ultimately it just kind of fell on its own face because of, and again, there was also other HasLabs going on at the same time. And I think since then they've done a lot better at nailing HasLab pitches or campaigns. And there's a lot of people out there that really hope they maybe do like just a made to order Rancor, like how they've done some stuff recently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the made to orders are kind of like things that weren't HasLab worthy, but that they believe, Hasbro believes there's fan demand there. I like that made to order thing. Get your pre-order in. It's what a lot of the smaller companies are doing, whether it's McFarlane Toys or other companies like that. So yeah, you hit on two more things, and then I'll say one more thing about the HasLab. You're right.
Yeah,
the price wasn't there and the tiers weren't there. It was soft. It wasn't much of a promise. Whereas the G.I. Joe classified HasLabs, the HISS tank, the Dragonfly helicopter, and now the Rattler, unbelievable tiers of figures, that they put with those figures. I mean, that's the way to go. And they clearly nailed it, and they got the rewards and just kept building and building. So the Rancor was not that at all. So the other thing I will add, so those are really good points, I think, from you and the other channel creators, but is that I hope Hasbro is realizing that the generational collecting aspect is changing. The new focus is with you guys and the Clone Wars, the fans of the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith. That it's all in that same time. Mm-hmm. A lot of fans, for that era, and maybe the fans of the original trilogy, they're a little bit longer in the tooth. I mean, it wasn't the Rancor from the new show. It was a Revenge of the a Return of the Jedi Rancor. So that was the Rancor. And, maybe we're kind of past that point now in our collecting where, new big things like that are finding their intended target market. Whereas, if it could have been from, the Book of Boba Fett, or is that the show that?
Yeah, Book of Boba Fett, where he rides the Rancor.
Right. So if we got that and, Danny Trejo is the keeper and, a bunch of cool figures, right, then maybe it could have had a chance with more modern figure. But I do like your presentation. I don't know if I were on the Star Wars team, I would pursue it, but it's clever because basically with one vehicle you get 2 decos, right? So that's more cost effective, and I like it. And you can get their droids.
Yep.
I never figured out if those droids, how they could actually fit in the sockets.
They don't.
For those starfighters. I think it's a total 3D model contrivance. Things
it's actually a crapshoot. Yeah,
they don't work. They don't
in
fit.
The universe. The droids do not fit in the ships. That's why with the toys they did the swappable little things where you just get the top of the astromech.
Exactly, that little hollow torso thing you take off, that hollow top thing. So that's really funny. But I think your idea is clever because it's actually got a kind of a little bit of Hasbro insight to it, which is, you can repaint the ship. You get a thing, and maybe your little bonus. Did you probably do little vulture droids? Crawling, or not vulture droids.
That was buzz droids. That was
buzz droids.
That was one of the stretch goals. Yep, you have 5 of them. Yeah, and then I think I threw in like the actual astromechs themselves as opposed to just the domes would be a stretch goal, and that's already an existing sculpt, and technically one of them would be a new character with the R4 for Obi-Wan. But it's funny because you kind of get to this point when you're making videos about the stuff, and I review all these action figures and stuff. It's like you get to the point where you're just brainstorming stuff and you're like, I'll just make that into a video and see if throw it at the wall, see if it sticks, see what people think about it. It's just little things like that are really fun.
That's really fun because that's the kind of stuff that I would have brainstormed, even for what an awesome 3 3/4, battle pack that would have been, right?
Yeah.
In space, you kind of get everything in there. That would have been a perfect Toys R Us exclusive, but it makes a neat display, especially with the buzz droids crawling all over the ship.
It would be something cool. And I really think that it's probably one of the only things in Black Series, because you're talking about market and collectors and stuff. Like, I have experienced that Black Series collectors tend to be all bark and no bite. They say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And then when it comes out and it's more than $25, which collectors already say is too much for a Black Series figure, they're like, I'm out, not touching it with a 10-foot pole, which is frustrating for people like myself and other collectors who are like, no, give me the small vehicles, give me more stuff. I want more for this line. It's very interesting, the disparity between, I would say that, and like you said, the collector that collects multiple lines as opposed to just Star Wars. I think that's where we really kind of hit the disparity there.
That's right. In my display room, and today I'm in my office. I'm not in my display room because it's covered with boxes. But I've got a bunch of display cases, and I have a hard time. Like, I have 18 display cases, pretty big. I have a hard time figuring out what I'm going to put in all those. Because I don't have enough room for my Star Wars. I don't have enough room for my Marvel Legends. I don't have enough room for my G.I. Joes. Like, the only way I'm going to manage all my stuff in a really large display room is by rotating everything out every couple of years, right? Otherwise I just don't have the room to display things like I really want. I've got, right now I've got 3 cases of just Batmobiles because I love Batmobiles. So, we all love different things about, about pop culture and what we do. And it's very rare that you just have someone who just really focuses, and it might be because, it's just the space limitations allow you to kind of fill up the space you have with just Star Wars.
Yeah. So with the Rancor talk aside, again, a lot of this conversation, I know plenty of my friends are going to really, really deeply appreciate, because again, it's things that we talk about just from the consumer standpoint.
Yeah.
So hearing your perspective on things like this is the kind of conversation that a lot of us wish we could hear more often.
Well, my insights on the Rancor were more from the fan side because I wasn't there when they were doing that, but it's just anyway, we've talked about it.
So, I got you. So I got a couple more questions just from other people that are friends of mine. So one question, this comes from a guy online, again, screen name Germania. What figure or product are you most proud of that you helped work on?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Germania. I got to tell you, my 10 years on Star Wars were some of the best years of my career. Total highlight from working with the team at Hasbro, the team at Lucasfilm. Like, we were a well-oiled partnership, and right there in the middle, we got the launch of Clone Wars. It was unbelievable. So some of the best, I think, accomplishments I had were being able to launch Clone Wars alongside Saga, like a Saga focus line, and not just shift our focus over to, say, Clone Wars, but to convince our management team that, hey, we had a great business here. Clone Wars is going to be additive or even multiplicative. Like, it's going to bring a lot of new fans in. So our focus is going to continue to be on both of them, and then doing things like the big Millennium Falcon. So, I'd say it's not a simple answer for Germania. It's being able to celebrate Clone Wars and keep the focus on the vintage at the same time. That was kind of one thing. And that's because we had built up a good relationship with our management. So we had a lot of trust, and, when they said something, we were able to follow through. We weren't over shipping, we were really hitting our numbers. So, but I'd say doing the big Millennium Falcon was definitely one of the highlights. And, having Mark Boudreau design that, Mark Boudreau, the legendary designer who passed away, unfortunately a couple of years ago, he designed that. Mark had designed every Millennium Falcon that Hasbro had ever done for, for figure lines. He was a legend, but the reason we were able to do the big Millennium Falcon, I'll give you a little bit of story, was because one year our engineering team came to us and told us that, we had still been using really the bones of that original Kenner Millennium Falcon from back in the day. We kept that going, and it had changed a little bit over time, added electronics, things like that. But, it was still something that we manufactured every once in a while, maybe as an exclusive. But the engineering team came to us and said, hey, look, we can't run this Millennium Falcon anymore because the tool cracked. The big piece of the big steel tool.
That sucked.
We never called it stool. So the big steel tool had cracked. It meant that, we couldn't use that tool anymore.
Yeah.
With a caveat. The engineers later told me we could have repaired the tool and kept using it for a certain amount of money.
Man.
But when they told me the tool was broken, I'm like, this is exactly what we need. So we went back to the team and said, here's our chance. If you were to design a new Millennium Falcon, what would you do? And everybody's mind, let's do this. We want it to be huge. We want every room in there. We want to do this. And Mark Boudreau, he leapt into it with gusto. We determined that I think it was going to be $150. We said it's going to be the most expensive Star Wars thing, I think we've ever done. I forget what the Queen's Starship costs, but I think it was maybe $100. So it said, but we're going to go for it. We're going to knock it out of the park. And we brought it in, and we made the pitch to our management team. And the way we set it up was equally masterful. We said, we can't make the Millennium Falcon tool anymore. The old one, it broke, which we could have fixed it, but The engineer didn't step in and said, but we can fix it. They let us tell the story. We were presented to our management team and said, but this is what we want to do. And we put that on the table. Mark Boudreau, put that out on the table, presented it. We said it's going to be 150, but we're confident fans will take it away. It's going to be our big focus. We'll do a TV show for it. And the electricity was unbelievable in the room. Like our management team loved it, and they ate it up. As a matter of fact, so that was one of the best presentations and pitches that I've ever done in my life. Our team that we did, it was unreal, and the feeling with the team, you celebrate that we were able to do that was unbelievable. But there's one more funny thing with that story too. So you've got this steel tool that's broken, right?
Yeah.
That you can't use in this steel slab. And Brian Goldner, who was our president, he basically said, wait a minute, can you provide, like, slice that tool, cut it with a bandsaw, and put a little piece of that tool in with every one of the new Millennium Falcons. So fans are getting a souvenir of the old. I thought that was like, what an incredible suggestion. Cool. It's kind of like if you've ever collected, like a Topps trading card, they do those relic cards where they slice bats or pieces of uniforms. And I'm familiar with that stuff. And I looked at it and I go, oh my gosh, what an incredible idea, to actually provide a relic in those sets. And so we looked into that. And That's so cool. There's a possibility that everybody who's got a Millennium Falcon could have had a Millennium Falcon with a relic of the Kenner Millennium Falcon in there. But the costing just would not make crazy sense. No, because there's more. To make a kid's toy like that was, you can't take a jagged piece of steel, right, and include that. So we would have had to encase it, slab it in something like, almost like a trading card company would do, just put it in a slab, or AFA would, slab it or something like that. The cost of doing that, off the charts. It would have raised the price. You're talking like another $50 just to include a little piece of the tool. So we didn't do that. But we did the Millennium Falcon, and it was incredible.
Yeah, I think the Zoo Boy Michael bought it at the room sales at ICC-Con this year. That Millennium Falcon. Yeah, he was so excited about it.
It's one of the most incredible toys. I mean, the fact that toy exists, it's just like it's a dream come true.
And the fact that the Ghost is supposedly going to be bigger, that's what keeps going through my head, is that the Ghost is going to be bigger than that.
Can't wait to see it. I can't wait to get my Ghost.
I think we're going on like a month away before it's going to ship here, so
it's exciting. I don't know about you, but I've ordered a lot of the other HasLabs that did. They're all shipping now. I just got Giant Man, who's right here.
He looks cool. You already opened him?
There's my Giant Man.
There he is.
Haven't opened him yet, but the Ghostbuster Proton Pack and the Neutrona Wand are shipping. I think a G.I. Joe thing. I don't even know what's shipping. All these things are shipping at once.
Awesome. And they're already paid for. So there you go. You don't even have to worry about it. So that's an awesome answer to that question. You kind of already answered this one, but I just wanted to ask it anyway. This comes from another guy from the Monday Night Figure Ball show. His screen name, Mr. Coffee. He wants to know if there's a disparity in budget between new media and legacy media. I'm assuming, based on what you've already said, that the new media gets a lot more budget when it comes to tooling, as opposed to the legacy media. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, and I'm assuming Mr. Coffee is referring to like Hasbro's budget, their expenditure budget, like where they're going to put their resources. Yeah, it also, you have to look at the context of what's coming out. If Star Wars was doing like one series a year, but so it's complicated. So it really depends on the feeling, and Lucasfilm has a good feeling for how much resources are going to be put against like maybe promoting something. So right. Lucasfilm makes it very clear to us, like where, very clear to the Hasbro team, like what they should be following and what priority they should be putting on stuff. So it's kind of like follow the leader a little bit. Lucasfilm's the leader in this, and then Hasbro will decide then what to put against it. And everything always has final approval by Lucasfilm. They approve all the lines right before they go into production. So, there's got to be a good feeling that appropriate support is being applied for all the new entertainment. It's in years where there's not a lot of entertainment like we had, where, we always, after a while, we now had, Clone Wars series every year. So we knew that was all the newness, and all the, a lot of new development money, especially for vehicles, just went into that newness. So it really depends on the year, where things are going, what the focus is going to be. But generally, you've got new entertainment, you want to put your development dollars against that, because that is either going to, bring in new fans. That's ideally what you want, that the show is going to find a great new audience, like, The Mandalorian did, or something like that, or it's going to, recatalyze interest in, collecting the whole line. But the new stuff is always going to be something that people are going to want. Whereas, some of the legacy stuff, especially for the original trilogy, you're on fumes a little bit for what new stuff there are, that may, like pretty much everything has been done so much that you've just got some Ewoks that haven't been done. And, it's like Cantina guys, Jabba's denizens. Those are all pretty C-level characters. So there's not a lot of newness to be plumbed in the original trilogy. I want that stuff, but it's not, they're all C-level characters like we talked about before. So your money should be put against new stuff.
Makes sense. And that's kind of what my thoughts always was, especially with Disney Plus, there was a good few years there where it was just show after show after show, and Hasbro couldn't keep up with the stuff that was coming out, let alone trying to also pay tribute and pay homage to the legacy media. So now that I know that, I think Lucasfilm, I don't know if there was ever an official statement made, but I know that from press conferences and stuff, it's been decided that they're going to do one new show a year, and they're limiting it to that. So I think we're already kind of seeing the start of it with how many new prequel figures are coming out and things like that. Like you said, C-list characters. I think that we're going to kind of start approaching, with the new media slowing down, Hasbro's going to get the opportunity to really start fleshing out for the Black Series, for Vintage Collection, everything else, really flesh out the character selection for a lot of the new shows and the legacy media as well. And that's something I personally am really excited for, to kind of flesh out my displays.
Yeah. Yep. Fill in those slots that haven't been, created before. Love it.
Absolutely. So I'm just making sure, I think I have 1, 2, 3 more questions, and then I just have a little lightning round, what's your favorite Star Wars character type question.
Sure.
The next one comes from a guy named Adam. His screen name is Mainline Exclusive Adam. He says, how does reuse get decided? As opposed to how long do you guys decide we're going to use this sculpt for this many years until we decide it's time for a new one? What's the thought process there?
So, we'll use that until the tool breaks, like the Millennium Falcon.
Literally till it breaks.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
So, it depends. There's no pat answer to that. So going back to what we talked about before, how we designed like basic figure waves, you have the A level, the B level, the C level. So when you actually tool up, let's say we tool up a new Darth Vader that's going to be like an A level character, we're actually making multiple tools for that character, because we have to have so much volume that's produced at the same time.
Right.
And those tools are independent tools, and they could, for the most part, sometimes they're gang tooled, but, so oftentimes, and also Hasbro uses, when they tool things, they use the highest quality steel possible. These aren't, they're not cheap. You can tool things in aluminum that have lower cycles. They may only last for 10,000 or less cycles. The steel tools that Hasbro uses last a long time. They do eventually need to be replaced, but you can run probably, let's say 1 million Darth Vaders off a tool. So usually when you have a hero character like that and you really like the sculpt and fans like it and it's selling well, you can just keep that in the line forever until that tool breaks. But sometimes you'll just retool it and you don't even know it. It just keeps going. So the length, the duration with which a figure is run really depends on what you think the market will bear. Because Hasbro, my natural instincts when I was running the team was I want to get the most I can out of every figure I can. And that means that if I'm running, say, let's say an A-wing pilot, as an example, kind of obscure on the pecking order of pilots. Mm-hmm. But if I run it, if I put it out in 2009 in a line, let's say, and there was huge demand for it, and the market just scooped them up, I could look at that figure and say, that's a good figure I could bring back in a future wave because I think demand will be there for that. And so I was always looking for things where I had like unmet demand that I could slot that guy back in and get another crack at it. So for me, if it was the most obscure figure, it was a one and done. I never wanted to make another Wilrow Hood or, the Cantina guys. They are one and done. But other figures, I'm always looking for ways to get another crack at it. So I guess the long answer to the short question for mainline exclusive man, yes, is there is no set expiration date on when you would drop a figure out of the line, except when you say these are absolutely sea-level figures. Do not run them again because it would be poison if you did. But anything else, you want to keep running that as much as possible wherever you need like a little bump, to get another, say fans really can't have enough of your new Gamorrean Guard. That's a good example in the vintage collection. Gamorrean Guard came out. The team at first thought we better be careful with this guy. People were going like, this is the greatest figure ever. They got that back out, and because they could chase the demand by watching it carefully, getting it back out, they realized they can do more. So cool. It really, there's no one answer to that question. It's more of a litmus test. Like the team really has to know, am I dealing with an obscure figure here? If I over release it, is it going to bite me? Or in some cases, let it play out and then chase the demand. Yeah, that's what you want to do. Chase the demand.
All I can think of you give such amazing answers to these questions, and I just got to say you give so much more to the answer than I would even imagine, and I just know these guys are just going to eat this up. So again, I have to sincerely thank you before we get to the end here. For all the effort and the thought that you're putting into these answers, because this is, again, collectors, we love this kind of conversation. This is awesome. So my one question, this is the last one here, and I don't know how much you would know about this. I think so. You would have been you went back to G.I. Joe after Force Awakens.
So actually, that answer is a little bit complicated. So. Okay. In my 18 years at Hasbro, I was over G.I. Joe for about 15 years and over Star Wars for about 10 years. And that adds up to more than 18 years.
Okay.
There were times when I grew within Hasbro. So when I came onto Star Wars, I was a director, and then I got promoted to vice president. So there was a time, I think in between I was senior director, so all the way to vice president. As I grew to vice president, at first I was just over Star Wars, but over time, additional brands were added to my responsibilities. Gotcha. And so at one time, I think I maxed out there were 10 brands I was working on any given day. We were launching Indiana Jones, launching Beyblade, Generation 2 Beyblade. I think I was working with Universal on Jurassic Park, future plans, doing a line, became an exclusive Toys R Us line, working on other Takara Tomy projects, some of which launched, some of which never launched, things like that. So I had a portfolio of projects, and brands would kind of come in and out of that. And G.I. Joe is one of those brands that came in and out with me like 3 or 4 times. But I always ended up being asked to take it back or given it back just because I understood the brand real well. After the first movie didn't do so well, I was asked to take the brand back and then launched Retaliation after that, and pretty much kept the brand all the way until the end of my tenure with Hasbro. So it was always, always there, but sometimes, went in and out depending on the focus that they were putting. And I couldn't have paid the attention to the first G.I. Joe movie while I was doing Star Wars, so somebody else needed to take that anyway. So things like that.
So this question comes from Jonah. His screen name is Ordinary Houdini. He asks, if you have any knowledge of this, as far as the digital printing for the faces on the figures goes, this goes for any line, not just Star Wars. How often does Hasbro use an actor's like actual face scan versus just reference photos for like just looking at how the actor looked in that media?
That's a good question. I will admit that since I'm not a designer specifically, I'm a marketer and a brand manager and a brand builder. So I worked with the design team, but the digital face technology came after my time on Star Wars. So I'm not 100% sure. I do know that when we were doing The Force Awakens, that JJ's team or Lucasfilm let us in and we scanned like as much as we could of, and we got the digital scans. I think Gentle Giant was actually doing all of the on-site scanning. So we got all those files. So I believe we did get the face sculpts for the actors' likenesses as well. But it's not always the case for everything that you have that. So I think when available, we definitely, we wanted to have that tech. We wanted to do that to be as accurate as possible. So I would say when it's available, for sure, everybody wants to use that. I will say though, I was a test case for some of our early digital printing efforts.
Really?
In Hasbro, I remember when we first got the tech, the scanning tech. I went into the model shop. They asked me to come in and they scanned my face. I am one unattractive guy, especially when it comes to, I think they printed out my face for like a 6-inch scale figure.
Yeah.
They said, we could not manufacture this. I don't know, maybe it's my nose or something. So they had to digitally retouch it. And they basically had to soften all the features for its manufacturability. You cannot manufacture things with like a lot of sharp angles, for instance, because those are difficult or they get soft. They want to make them softer over time. So my face just became a lot softer than the original print. And ironically, that same sculpt that they modified was used on 2 different action figures.
Really?
Yeah. So one was for there was a line of Mandalorian figures we did that I believe was an Entertainment Earth exclusive. We did 2 sets of Mandalorian figures back before Mandalorians were as hot as they were now.
Because you have a Mandalorian named after you.
That I am one of the characters. Wait, can I say this? Will Lucasfilm can I actually say this? I don't know. But let me say this. The character Derryl DePriest in one of those Mandalorian multi-packs may or may not bear a resemblance to the modified sculpt of the head that I posed for.
That's too funny.
And the name is an anagram of my name, so Derryl DePriest. And then all of those characters were done at a time when Karen Traviss was writing her Mandalorian books. And Mandalorian was always this like cool subculture of characters that we knew. I love the Mandalorians. Especially love reading the comics about them and
they're cool.
And just their creed and ethos. Awesome stories. And I'm like, let's do Mandalorians. I think there's a subset of fans who want that. That's why they went to Entertainment Earth. We proposed that. They ate it up. They said, we'll do this. And boy, those sets came out really well. But they were all like a lot of created characters to kind of fill a void that didn't exist in any of the Lucasfilm Entertainment. So we kind of like danced around the edges of the novels and the comics and things like that to create those sets. And I'm also General Iron Bear in the G.I. Joe line. So the general that created the October Guard, because I'm a big fan of the October Guard, and that set came out through the Hasbro Collectors Club.
That is too cool. That is such a cool.
2 characters.
Awesome. So my last question from another person comes from my dad, as if he hasn't asked you enough questions already. His question is, can you talk about your thought process when bringing new ideas for toys to the table? Do you think about how you would have played with these toys as a kid if you'd had them back then, or maybe how you would interact with them now as an adult collector? Or do you think about how other kids or other adults would collect or play with the toys?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So to me, play was always a central focus of designing any toy line. The collectability after the fact, we did take that into account. And that was maybe more done with the, sometimes the character selection in mind. But it was always play front and center. My focus was I knew the health of the brand back then. For Star Wars and really any line, G.I. Joe is through kids. So kids were going to be the biggest part of the line. It has totally flipped today. Now collectors are driving the bus, for Hasbro. But back then it was all kids. So I wanted a healthy ecosystem. I thought of like we were talking before, Tommy, the figures and the vehicles, less so the play sets. Play sets were always a struggle for me because it's very difficult to design a great play set. They're never really as complete as you want.
I totally get it.
Sometimes you don't have walls, floors, roofs, and to do that is really expensive. Just look at the cantina. There's no roof, but, and it's not even complete. It's awesome, but you just can't get there. So when we had characters like, or figure or opportunities like what you had, you had the ATTE, right? Was one of your...
I did. That was one of my favorite ones. Yeah.
So the ATT and the turbo tank that followed that were quintessential examples of vehicles that were also functional play sets because there were so many areas to it. After we did the big Millennium Falcon, we did the giant the Walker, the Imperial Walker. So
AT-AT.
The AT-AT. So we did the AT-AT. The AT-AT that Brian Parrish did, he was the designer who created that, wanted to make it so playable. So he put like all these levels inside and repelling things inspired by the show, but beyond what we ever saw on screen to make it incredibly playable. The speeder bikes that came out of the back. And that's how we approach the lines. We want a play statement. This is how kids should play it, will play with it. And that was always front and center. And a lot of the things we did too were when we first created a line, before we even get to the figures, we're like, what's our role play statement for this year? Because role play was so huge for us. Every kid had a lightsaber as a rite of passage.
Yes.
It was like a lightsaber and a Nerf blaster. So, and so we were always like, what new statement can we make in lightsabers this year? And I remember when we went out to Lucasfilm and met with a video game producer named Hayden Blackman on The Force Awakens. So he showed us like what they were doing for The Force Awakens. It's like this lightsaber that can, change colors and had totally different. We said, that's it. That's our play focus. We want to do that. So we look to the play first, and then kind of the collectability. We take care of that, and that kind of falls out of having that good solid foundation of play first.
So you say that, that's different now with collecting. Collectors kind of are driving the bus on the market now, as opposed to, 10, 20 years ago. Again, I keep going back to the Black Series as an example. I see a lot of collectors kind of see this kind of inconsistency, I guess I'll call it, between like some of them have like play features and then some of them are literally only collectible action figures. I think we talked about this at ICC-Con. I think it was maybe like there was never an official agreement on what the Black Series should be for like collecting versus a toy line. Is that?
So we knew that it was going to be like predominantly collectors, but we didn't want to preclude kids buying into the Black Series because dads could share this with their kids because they were great figures. They were still toys at their heart. They're Black Series, they're toys. They're collectible toys, but they're at its heart toys that you can play with.
Gotcha.
So the team always, wanted to make them as fun as possible. But I know that features and mechanisms and gimmicks like that, I was always kind of down on that because you really don't need that. It doesn't necessarily sell more, especially in Black Series. It's not going to sell more to have like a gimmick, an action gimmick in a toy. In fact, it could ruin the aesthetics and make the line less collectible. So I was always cautious about that, when I was on the line. So the priority wasn't there. If kids were buying Black Series, it's because it's a great figure. It's a figure they liked, or their dad was giving it to them, or something like that. So, and back at the time when we launched Black Series, it was $20, which is a lot for a figure, but it's not a lot for a great figure that could be your first figure, like your first Darth Vader. Like if that's what you got first, a kid's going to remember that. Like, this was a fantastic figure. So, and they're going to play with it on their own merits as an action figure rather than something that has a lever action, sword lightsaber slash. So I always hated those gimmicks.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand them. I thought they ruined the figures. But
That's interesting. And then real quick, just a statement from my dad. He says he wants to sincerely thank you for the passion that you brought to your work at your time at Hasbro, and that you helped facilitate hours upon hours of fun, interactive play between me, my dad, and my little brother. And those are memories that he will always cherish, not just because we were his kids, but also because those Star Wars toys were and still are, quote, freaking awesome. He says he also personally enjoyed playing with all of them with us, and that he looks forward to, he kept everything that me and my brother ever had, he has in the basement. He says he looks forward to playing with them with his grandchildren too. So again, from him, myself, my brother, and plenty of other people, just a sincere thank you for all the effort that you put in at your time there, because you, in a way, you created all of this that's behind me right now. Because if it weren't for the battle packs and things like that, I would not have such, because I had other toys. I played with other things as a kid, but it was always Star Wars. It always came back to the Star Wars toys for me and so many other people. So that's a sincere thank you.
Thank you. I mean, you're the reason we were able to do it. So, there's a nice harmony of, an opportunity and a fan base that was there too. But the biggest thrill for me is hearing how much you enjoyed them, because, that's why, that's what motivated me is driving it and hoping that, the audience that we were getting was having the same great memories I had, same experiences I had, storytelling, with my figures and
absolutely,
with my Star Wars toys. So thank you.
Yeah. So real quick, this was something I used to do a ton of interviews with people like other YouTubers and stuff. But I always had 3, I called them lightning round questions that I'd ask people. These are super easy. So first one, what is your favorite Star Wars movie out of all the movies? Which one's your favorite?
Oh, it's A New Hope. The first one, the original one, just Star Wars to me.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Without question. That's what I saw in the theater when I was 12 years old. And that Star Destroyer went overhead, my life changed.
Then which of all the series and TV shows, which Star Wars show is your favorite?
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's tough not to love Clone Wars. Just what an amazing show. But when no show has gotten me emotionally going, like when The Mandalorian, first Mandalorian came back, because I was like, we're back, baby. Star Wars is here. This is a dream come true. We're in a new era. And so I loved The Mandalorian. But I also loved the storytelling that we saw with what's the spy character?
Andor.
Andor. So I loved Andor too. So sorry, man, I'm getting old. My brain's getting out. Too many things. So I love Andor because they were willing to dive into stories that, this went beyond the big screen, a little bit of a slower pace, a lot slower pace. And I know that turned off some fans, but, so those 2 shows for me, The Mandalorian, the excitement of new unexplored territory, and Andor, the untold stories, that they can dig deeper in. Those are my favorites.
Awesome. And then finally, if you could pick just one, who's your favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, that's Luke Skywalker.
Awesome.
Without question. Awesome. Luke was my first figure. He's the one I imprinted on. He's kind of, to me, he's like the Batman of Star Wars. It's like everybody can relate to, to being Luke. Without question, he's it for me.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, I just want to sincerely thank you for just all the work you've done over the years, and just, I hope that it's definitely, it's good work that you've done, because it has created, I literally, all the dudes that are going to be in my wedding are all dudes that I met through this hobby.
That's awesome.
It's literally, that's just, it's people that I've connected with, people that, I've created lifelong friendships with through this hobby. It's just, everyone is just, it's all because of this, so I have to sincerely thank you. The relationship that I've been able to have with my dad. We've become so close over the hobby. He was a collector since before I was born. So, a lot of his collection he's passed down to me, and I've been able to display and appreciate. Yeah, I know that is there's anything you want to plug for yourself? I know you have a book that you recently put out.
So a book came out a couple years ago. It's the Vintage Collection Archive Edition. It's all about the first, say, 10 years or so of the Vintage Collection and the story of launching it. So I launched that and launched the Vintage Collection my time at Hasbro. That came out a couple years ago. And if you see me at a toy show, you can get it from me there. But that was a blast working on, and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, I'm just trying to think of the next projects I'm going to do. Hopefully, it's publishing related. I'd love to write books. I've written a couple of them now, and there's others. Cool. I want to do all toy related. So
yes, of course, that's the only thing that matters.
It is. I think it's one of the things that keeps me ticking. My passion, my love for toys, collecting, and play, and all these things that we talked about. It's thrilling to talk to you, Tommy, about how you genuinely grew up playing with them, and now you can share it with your dad.
Yeah,
not just good hair. You can enjoy the memories of Star Wars, right? Playing with your dad. I remember that your dad had cool spiky hair too. I like.
Yeah, right. I'm slowly taking on that haircut there. Yeah,
Hey, congrats on your upcoming wedding. So.
Thank you. Yeah, we're getting married in summer 2026. We're gonna give it some time to make sure we really get the funding together for the wedding. And that was one. Jen is her name. She was probably the first woman ever that not only was accepting of my hobby, but also was like, there will be times I show her something and I go, yeah, look at this that got revealed. And she'll be like, are you getting that? I'm like, no. And she'll be like, why? That's so cool. Why aren't you? Well, I knew I had to lock her down,
That's awesome.
As soon as possible. But yeah, congrats. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. But
my wife hates it.
She hates it?
hates it because when we were first meeting, I was actually going through a divorce.
Okay.
And I kind of stopped collecting for a while. I kind of put it aside, and she came over to my place one time, I remember, and she saw like a case of I don't know, probably Spawn toys, McFarlane toys at the time or whatever. And she said, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, all the rest of the stuff was packed away in my garage." And I'm like, "Oh, it's just some toys. I kind of like them. They're pretty cool." And then after we got married, I full force just jumped back into it. And she said, "What is this? You like deceived me." So luckily with you and Jen, like she's going into it fully together, and she's supportive, and my wife fights me for everything that comes into the house.
Yeah, that's the other part too, though, is I work a lot of overtime. So Jen knows that if I want something, I work extra so I can get the stuff. Yeah, as long as we don't cut into the budget, that's all she cares about. But
it's responsible. It's responsible collecting.
We try to be. But yeah, I would love to have you on again sometime in the future. This has been a blast, just talking about different things.
I had a great time. Great time talking. It's like, you and the buddies I met at ICC. It's really the first time that I've seen the generation come out, and I'm planning to do that show again, pretty much every year. But I knew the time was going to come when the kids who grew up playing Clone Wars were going to be the collectors of the future. So It's kind of there now. So hey, but it's great talking to you guys. I think I talked the whole weekend to a whole bunch of different people, and it's fresh because it's the new wave of fans who are here collecting, and that's exciting. To know that this enthusiasm here, a little bit of a different focus than the old maybe Kenner type style of collectors. So I'd love to see it in the hobby, because it means to me that the hobby is just going to continue. We've got a fresh future, and hopefully Hasbro's paying attention, and they're seeing the new fans and know that their roots are in Clone Wars and the new entertainment of that time, and that's going to infuse their thinking. But this new generation of fans is great. It gives them the Hasbro team there an opportunity to really take some chances on stuff, and that's what I hope we're seeing, that they're paying attention and they know who
some of these recent reveals in the last 6 or so months, are like much more obscure prequel characters. Clone Wars characters are starting to come out, and here and there the pre-orders are selling out, and I'm like, this is great. When's the last time that a pre-order sold out for a Black Series figure? I couldn't tell you. So I'm glad, especially considering they're dialing stuff back right now after the big COVID collector boom, and everyone's already withdrawn from that now. So I think they've established what the market is right now, and they're seeing what people want. And I think if they lean hard into these prequels and this Clone Wars these next couple of years, that the hobby's just going to grow again.
Hey, I hope you're onto something. So that's good. It is an exciting time. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
I sense that changes in the line are afoot, and I like them. I like them a lot. So,
well, again, Derryl, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. Thank you for taking the time. I know initially before we started, we said I was going, maybe an hour. We'll see if it goes longer than that. So again, I really appreciate you.
I don't even know what the time is. Oh my gosh, yeah. What a great time. I had no idea. But
so again, I will send you the video. It's going to get posted as we're recording this. It'll get posted tomorrow on my channel, and I have like a Spotify and everything. I'll put it on too. But awesome. Again, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Tony.
And everyone, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. There will be more like this with different people coming out in the future. But this was the first one. I think it was a great start. So thank you again, Derryl. And everybody, thanks for watching. We'll catch you for the next one. And may the Force be with you.
Take care.